Hello there. So, you have an avoidant ex, and well, you have been crying yourself to sleep every single day, and you're posting obvious quotes on Instagram stories, your Instagram feed, your Facebook, that are clearly about you being sad and maybe not being over someone, maybe having residual frustrations with someone. It seems like your avoidant ex is just gotten on with their life. Like, they're so over it. Like, they're not even thinking about you. They're just posting pictures at the gym and posting Instagram stories from that cool weekend trip that they took with their friends. And you're like, do they even miss me? Do they ever love me? Do they even care? Why is it that I am dying and they are totally fine? Well, the reality is, when we avoidants go through a breakup, we look totally fine on the outside, but we are putting in an Oscar-winning performance for Best Actor or Best Actress because we are dying on the inside and we'll never let you know that. So I'm going to talk about that in this video. This video is all about what's actually going on behind our facade when we're going through a breakup. But if you're brand new here, my name is Wando. This channel is called Confessions of an Avoidant, and it's about attachment from the perspective and experiences of someone who is an avoidant person. I also like talking about on this channel CPTSD, childhood trauma, having a stressful childhood, and how to kind of cope with that as adults and make the best of our lives. So if that excites you and you appreciate this channel's existence, I would greatly appreciate it if you liked, commented, and shared this video if you really, really like it. Okay, so the dismissive avoidant during a breakup. What is really going on behind the facade? I see so many people saying online that, when they have gone through a breakup with their ex who's avoidant, it seems like they just get on with their life. It seems like they don't care about them, while you're miserable. And it seems like, avoidant people, they're just so strong. They can just shut off their feelings and act like nothing happened. That is absolutely not true. As I said in a previous video that I uploaded, which is all about how us avoidants, it's not that we don't feel things, it's that we don't communicate them. We have a fear of communication, we have a fear of being vulnerable, we have a fear of being like open and like letting people see the truth of us. So it's not that we don't feel anything after the breakup. It's just that we have a desire to be really protective over ourselves and to not communicate. And that desire to be hyper protective of ourselves and not communicate and not be vulnerable, that almost always outweighs the desire to be vulnerable and to connect. So just to be clear, it's not that we're doing okay in the breakup. It's not that we're totally fine. In my last relationship as an avoidant person, and I broke up with my partner, I cried myself to sleep every single night. I was so sad. There was so many times where I wanted to call him and be like, can we just like work this out? Or there were so many times where I wanted to call him and be like, can we talk about this again? Maybe I didn't say this very well when we were together. There were so many times where I was looking at my phone and looking at his name on WhatsApp and seeing that he was online and just, oh my God, I just wanted to message him so badly because I knew that he was there and I felt close to him in a way. And then I just couldn't. It's almost like being avoidant, I like to say, is like having automatic locks on a car. And it's like you want to leave the car if you're in the back maybe, but someone who has access to the automatic brakes, they make sure that you can't leave the car. And that's how I feel about being an avoidant person. It's like you can want to reach out to someone. You can want to be vulnerable. You can want to really open your heart and lay everything on the line. And then those automatic locks come on and they just are like, nope, you sit right here. You are not moving. You're not talking. You're not doing anything. Do not reach out to that person. So it is not that we don't have feelings, especially because for me in that last relationship, I lived right next to my ex. My apartment was a couple blocks down from his. So it's like his street was like this, and my street was like this. And then whenever I left my street, I had to like turn left, and then I would go onto his street, and that was to go to the grocery store, and there was this amazing vegan food store and this pharmacy and stuff. So I always had to like go on to his street, and I would always be like, oh man, I really, really hope I run into him. Like, you know, I would be triggered so much because there were so many times where I would leave his apartment and walk back to my apartment, or sometimes he would meet me at my apartment and we'd walk hand in hand to his apartment just down that street. And so it's like, sometimes in a breakup, it's nice when you're removed from something that's always going to trigger you about that person. But like, because I had to walk down that street all the time, I was constantly triggered to think about him because I was praying that I would run into him, and I just never did. And so like, that was really, really hard. I think that was maybe my hardest breakup, because I was just triggered all the time because of that street. But there's just these automatic lock mechanisms in our conditioning, in our subconscious minds when you're avoidant, that just force you to like sit put and don't reach out. And there's so many times where you're like so close to grabbing that phone and doing it. So I'm sure a lot of people who aren't avoidant are so like, I see people just thinking like we're so strong, and that's why we're like this. But I don't think it has anything to do with being strong, though. I think it has to do with like a lot of resilience is more like it. I think there's a few things it comes down to. I think one is stubbornness. You know, we got really good at being stubborn as children. And I always think about stubbornness a lot because it's the thing about myself that I like the least. It's the thing about being avoidant that I like the least. But, you know, if you take an inventory of your childhood, if you had a parent that was constantly scapegoating you or constantly yelling at you or blaming you or, you know, having these mood swings towards you, then you're constantly like getting yelled at for absolutely no reason. And I feel like for me, stubbornness was my way of kind of like battling the storm, like holding onto the tree for dear life and being like, no, I'm not going to let you make me think that I've done something wrong here. And, you know, as a kid, that's a really powerful tool to not let, you know, someone who's like an emotional terrorist break you to the point where you feel bad about yourself all the time when you shouldn't. And for me, being stubborn helped me get through that. But as an adult, it's not the greatest trait. And so I think in your childhood, when you're justified in having ego and pride and not kind of submitting to the emotional terrorist parent, it works. But in adulthood, stubbornness and not reaching out to someone when you could apologize about something, or you could clear the air about something, or you could take accountability for something. You know, there's some good things to stubbornness, but I do think in a lot of situations in adulthood, stubbornness does kind of prevent you from really kind of taking accountability or maybe revisiting a conversation. I think another reason that we're so good at putting on an Oscar-winning performance, that we're totally fine, is because we had to do that in our childhoods. We are really good at suppressing how we really feel. It's like in your childhood, if you dealt with a lot of neglect and your parent was constantly dismissing you and discarding you and acted like they wanted nothing to do with you, and on the inside, it's like, well, you wanted to watch the game with your dad, or you were so excited when mom talked about the things that you guys would do on the weekend, going to that restaurant, and then it didn't happen. Or maybe you were like really, really excited for some TV show that you were going to watch, and then like the power is cut off, and and you just know going to them and being like, hey, can you like fix the situation with the power being shut off? Can you call the electricity company and get this taken care of? It's like, no, you can't go to your parent and say that. They'll tell you to go away and deal with it and get the hell over it. So it's like in childhood, there was just a lot of suppressing of your emotion because you just learned through neglect that it's an absolute waste of time to communicate your emotions and talk about how you are feeling. And that brings me to the last point, which is why I think avoidant people are so good at appearing strong, but really it's just a cycle of conditioning. So it's almost like all we know. So it's not something we're trying to do, it's something that we just do. The last thing is learned helplessness. So with neglect, there's so many situations in your childhood that you can't help. You can't do anything about. You can't escape from it. And you just learn to accept it. Like having no heating in the winter because your parents are, living paycheck to paycheck and they're irresponsible with their finances. And you go through these periods where, you're cold in the winters and, you have a little heater and they're just like, this is life, and you just learn to accept it. Or maybe your parents are never around to take care of you, and then when they come home, they don't really have food for dinner, and you have to just like figure out what you're gonna eat. Or maybe just constantly being yelled at for stupid things that you shouldn't be yelled at for, or scapegoated for things. Like maybe, dad, mom can't find the remote control for the TV, and you get yelled at for like 20 minutes over a stupid remote control. It's like, you just learn to deal with that in your childhood, that like you're just in these situations and you can't help yourself, you can't get out of it, you can't make it better. And that transfers into adulthood through conditioning, through repetition of just learning that you have to accept these situations, So when that colleague of yours gets a promotion, when you feel like you did most of the work that led to them getting praise, you just have this learned helplessness, or you accept that they are seen more favorably compared to you by your boss. Or, if you have a friendship and, your friend did something kind of passive aggressive, but they did it a couple of times and your friendship just gradually broke down and you're just kind of like, whatever, screw that person. When really you're missing them and you'd rather have a conversation with them and kind of just air what you're feeling and maybe try to repair the relationship. Instead, you just let it go. And in relationships, maybe you didn't express as much as you wanted to about what was frustrating you in the relationship, and you realize in hindsight that you were kind of projecting some of your expectations onto your partner and not communicating them well. And what do you do instead? You just go into that learned helplessness and say, what's the point? So I hope that explains why avoidant people, why we come across as being so over it and so cool and like we didn't care and like we've moved on, when actually we are not doing so well. And just because someone is not, posting sad quotes on social media, like just because they're not doing that doesn't mean that they're not thinking about you. There's even a chance that they might reach out to you. It might take some months. But I just think it's important to know that I'm sure you meant a lot to them. And just because they're not telegraphing it on the internet or in how they communicate with your mutual friends and whatnot doesn't mean that they are not dying inside. We die inside. So I hope that this video was enlightening. I hope that you liked it. And please share it because it really helps a new channel, sharing in particular. If you need this video to keep watching it to help you get through a breakup, share it to your Facebook or your Instagram or wherever, so that maybe you can watch it again and remind yourself that, your partner did love you and you're not alone in the pain that you're going through. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.